Welcome to another Tuesday training segment with the 2MK team. Today, as promised, we are going into our discussions of one of the final things we needed to understand and get better at in order to play Guilty Gear beyond the beginner low intermediate level. Therefore, this is going to be one of our more poking at concept streams, and you're not as likely to see matchups or necessarily even other players, but you can, as always, feel free to join us. This is a US East Coast lobby. The information on how to join should be both in the tweet on our Twitter 2_MK_FGC and in the stream title. Today we are talking about scrambles from escapes. It's primarily a matter of when you know you've gotten out of a situation, but you aren't sure if it's your turn to attack or not. This doesn't come up that often when you know the opponent well, but the levels of it also shift, so it may actually be that in some cases you think a situation is not a scramble, when it is a scramble for someone else. A lot of scramble situations have a lot more to do with the accuracy of a player than any direct things related to skill in recognizing the situation. There's one. Though that one was a bit more executional. This is something that comes up quite often in Unrabbit's matches at locals, as there are certain characters who really require you to be good at this. Making that judgment, for example, is a matter of understanding whether or not the opponent is going to keep coming for you or not, and you could technically consider the projectile at the end there to be reactable. In short, I moved into a position that meant it was not actually my turn in terms of at least charging. As you get better at the game and build up more skills in converting combos, landing specific attacks, recognizing that your opponent took the attack in the air or got counter-hit in a way that you generally didn't expect, you can get more and more out of scrambles as well. Making it even more important not to just try to get your damage by mashing buttons and hoping something familiar actually hits. That said, it's not necessarily that attacking immediately is always a bad idea, but rather that you should consider it. A lot of the time, your opponent is thinking the same thing, and depending on their character's moves, this is a lot better for them than it is for you. Here's a good example. That was partially a reaction. And since it is a scramble, if you're even slightly familiar with the scramble, you can prime yourself for the correct outcome for it. That, on the other hand, was seeing the opponent go up, wanting to get out of the corner, and attempting the Ryujin because everything else was likely to get hit by Jacko's attack. However, Jacko used the fastest of her attacks to get through this, which is exactly what we were talking about before. If your opponent has the option for a really fast attack, sometimes your options are shifted a little bit in terms of their priorities. Characters with better air normals have to think about this a lot more than most. This is normally happening so fast that if you're inexperienced in fighting games, it can feel as if things are just completely random. Especially if you haven't learned one of our most primary skills. How to watch your opponent instead of yourself. When you've done a move, you often need to learn to make sure that you have not spent too much time looking at your own character to make sure that the move didn't go wrong or something. When you don't have perfect execution, this can be dangerous and problematic because you actually will miss certain things. But no one's execution is absolutely perfect and eventually you have to just trust it. As you get faster and faster at tracking things in fighting games, it becomes easier and easier to do this as a whole, but recognizing the scramble, learning to watch your opponent, and so on do not give you quite enough to maximize damage, nor to put yourself into optimal positions by setting up scrambles that you understand. One scramble often leads into another, and during a scramble it is generally not quite the same as a quick draw when both players are not moving much in neutral and waiting for the other to make the first move. That's what you're more likely to see in this matchup. Jam is more likely to cause the opposite. Very mobile on both sides, often, and both players must immediately recognize which button should I hit at exactly this distance in exactly this situation. But just finds Jacko is capable of doing this in a way that doesn't seem possible for most players at beginning levels. Jackal is a character where she loses advantage fairly quickly, in fact immediately depending on what the minions are doing, when she takes a hit. But this also tends to cause opponents to want to approach her immediately, as it's their chance to get pressure before she gets restarted, especially if the houses that she puts out are defended well enough that they can't just back off and wait. All the minions may disappear, but there may be minions soon to come out again. And this is bad, so they often push the attack. Jackal therefore can learn a lot from recognizing that the opponent wants to attack soon after hitting her, and if she didn't get knocked down, rather than thinking about what her next attack should be, watch the opponent to see what she can recognize from them, and with punish or counter. She's also very well equipped to do this, like moves-wise, so that's usually not a problem. She also has really great air, forward, and back dashes, meaning that if her choice is, okay, my opponent is coming for this and I need to get away, she's often able to do that too. There's a good example. She took a hit that did not knock her down, and despite the fact that Omnirabbit is generally fairly patient, the next correct thing to do would be to expect an attack, or to use that moment where the opponent does not attack to aim for a reposition to make another move safe. All these little things get built up over time to help the player recognize when they can gain things by letting scrambles happen, at the cost of taking some risks. A lot of this is invisible though. Even ripping moves can turn into an instant situation of scramble is good for me now. This level of tracking is something that gets built up over time, always, but it also helps if you understand your opponent enough to know which thing they're likely to do. So demonstrating it is actually quite easier with less people in the stream. Even though Jam and Jackal have relatively similar speeds for their air dashes, Jackal's game plan is built on a different thing, and she cannot do as many quick moves out of it. Therefore, if they are both forced into the air, there's a much higher chance of Jam winning the scramble. Unfortunately for Jam, this does not mean she's necessarily going to get to do a lot of damage, meaning that it comes down to where exactly they collide, since Jackal then has to care primarily about whether or not she has houses out still, and unless you're very focused on it, Jam doesn't tend to destroy Jackal's houses that much. She just outmaneuvers minions and uses her very wide sweeping normals to get rid of them, while passing through them on the way to wherever it is she needs to go. At very high levels of play, none of this tends to be going on, as to them, there are very few things that are truly scrambles. The player normally has some idea of exactly what they want to do in the situation, and they just work from there. Again, because they've spent so much time learning how to watch their opponents. But even here, you can still see it come up in the other sense. And this game does not actually end the round at the moment it turns to 0. It has to pick down one more. Or something like that. But the similar principle, the key thing we discussed and intend to make an important aspect of this stream is when you have escaped from your opponent in any way, you must consider whether or not the next thing you do should be a counterattack. Sometimes it should, but often your opponent will use whatever is most effective and usually fastest in that same situation. An opponent on the defensive is in what you hear referred to as the quick draw situation. The difficulty with a quick draw is that since you are often trying to get your opponent to make a mistake, you have to understand a lot more about their ranges. You can, however, count on the fact that if your character has a command grab, it is often helpful in that situation just seen. There are resets where one character has landed near to another and doesn't know whether or not a button is coming. It may depend also on the mindset of the player, but most of us don't just immediately mash buttons when we feel as if the opponent has gone from neutral to that situation. Overheads, as you've just seen, are also often very useful here. This is also a situation that comes up off air blockable moves when the opponent has tried to make an air escape without being absolutely confident that the thing they were trying to get escape from can be blocked in that way. A common problem for beginners in general. They want to get out of the situation, but they don't actually know whether or not the move you use to counter this is one where they are advantaged on the landing. Since this is also dependent on the height you actually make contact with some of these moves in, there's sometimes what feels like no way to know at all. Characters with high air mobility options such as Jam cause a different type of problem in here also. Either due to the level which their normals move at, or their ability to recover in the air and still do attacks, something that you don't see in many games other than Guilty Gear. Even most quote-unquote anime games these days don't have complete movement options in the air after teching. Or their moves tend to be a lot more lateral and their normals are a bit less bewildering. Our upcoming content for this game does thankfully include some exercises to help you get used to the idea of set scrambles, get used to your air normals, and how to combo them in juggles off of various situations. And help you build up an understanding of when air blocking leads to an advantageous situation for you. The more comfortable you become with specific timings for this, the more you'll be able to do as a whole. Both in terms of playing for long periods, and of course, dealing with the scrambles when they do happen as a result of both players being the end. One of the primary reasons why this is so important though, is that when you are facing a character or matchup you're unfamiliar with, sometimes this is going to be your only chance to do anything. You will not know whether or not your escape route is correct. And you may not know enough about your opponent's moves to know whether or not, even if it was correct, they have no good options or you're at advantage. And that is among the most stressful aspects of this game, fighting an altogether new character due to the large variety of characters in this game and the differences in their playstyles. Even among players. Since scrambles are such an integral part of the game, you may meet an opponent who gets into the same scramble but has an entirely different idea of what to chase down, the response, or even the advantageous move upon returning to the quick draw or neutral is. Similarly, as you've just seen, Jackal can step that up. Because she knew, given Kai's abilities and his current meter, running straight at him is actually sometimes a decent tactic for Jackal. But she has to run at him with the full intention of getting hit by a normal that isn't going to knock her down. Why? Because it sets up a scramble. On most characters, Kai gets to keep on doing things. He's immediately advantaged if he catches you with typically 5H or something. But Jackal is not so simple. So if she has no minions, needs to get in, etc., there's a very real chance that just running straight at Kai is a valid option. The Kai player does not necessarily want to overcommit to anything, because she can jump over a lot of his longer methods. And he sort of wants her to jump, because even if he sticks out the stabbing slash using his fence, it won't necessarily mean that he won't be able to anti-air or similar. It depends a lot on instant air dash skill and similar things. But you see that moment. It is a scramble and not necessarily advantaged to Jackal. Kai could just retreat, but in the previous demonstration of that situation, Kai was actually in the corner. Meaning that there was just no downside other than Kai being extremely risky and going for Greed Sever or something like that to check the run. He does have good options, but a lot of them require him to get quite close, or let Jackal get quite close. And therefore, you're still at least putting pressure on the player mentally. A lot of the time when you see a player mash out of something, using either some invincibility or some range aspect of their special move, this is what they are thinking of. Is this way that we have generally used the term air superiority. Characters with air superiority have wide, sweeping air moves, usually fast ones, and can often cover basically any spot in the air, including behind them, with some air normal. Kai is, for example, not one of these characters. Kai does have good options in the air, but mainly he changes things by distance. Most of Kai's air normals hit around the same place. The few that don't hit spaces that Kai isn't really thinking about or needing much. Meaning that generally, if Jackal, for example, were to hit space things exactly so that she flies over Kai's head at a particular spacing, he must respond not by jump back normal, even though he can sometimes do this if he has reactions fast enough, but he often just has to respond with a cross-cut anti-air or a perfectly respaced 60. This can put some stress on him when he is in a scramble because he doesn't know whether or not to wait for her to dash or just anti-air directly in front of him. But the way this situation helps Jackal the most is actually on empty jumps. Since Kai is very heavily primed to react altogether, empty jumping into something like Illusion Driver or sometimes just for crouching kick adds yet another layer he has to worry about. And that is where characters that have air superiority don't care as much. Since they don't care if the opponent goes with an empty jump, they tend to hit anyway. Jackal therefore builds up a mental pressure on the opponent in those situations, allowing minions to last longer, allowing houses to stay safer, and buying her more time to use various abilities. The air superiority style character just jumps back. Sometimes they jump back late, sometimes they don't. But they're thinking more so about the fact that they want to get off the ground before they can get hit by things like crouching K or Mute Driver, rather than thinking about whether or not they need to anti-air Jackal. They just jump back and hit the button, and if Jackal read for a particular thing, it happens to anti-air quite a lot of the time. Understanding where this built-up mental stress can be applied to an opponent helps a lot, but as you can see, eventually, you do have to risk the idea of getting hit. How much can you afford to get hit is your bigger question. Is the stress worth the couple of hits you take from what is required to cause it? Doing the safest thing in a scramble, particularly in Guilty Gear, reduces the amount of strain your opponent has. And that's basically as simple as it gets. The key is to recognize that a scramble, or at least a quick draw, is occurring, and not just do it because maybe they won't be expecting this, because as a player gets better, expectation isn't required to stop your shenanigans anymore. Confusion is required to make it impossible for them to do so. The Venetian Driver you just saw was a good example of that. It was not really that dangerous to do it at that point, and had Jam moved basically at all, it would have either worked out, or really just not been a problem in any way. Even cornering oneself is a similar thing when you have enough health, enough meter, that you think you can make something out of it. Even though that situation, for example, turned out poorly, it wasn't because of cornering self. Building up this ability allows you to play fighting games like Guilty Gear and probably enjoy yourself a bit even when you have poor conversions or poor combos. Although you may find people less likely or willing to play you because it's very stressful. This brings us to the concept of the offensive scramble. Offensive scrambles are much rarer, honestly. They have to do with a moment where the player has landed a move, definitely cannot combo, but they landed it in a situation that neither player is completely comfortable with or understands. The move you see Jackal using that has mostly been beneath the land for this round is a good example of this. Under most circumstances where this move has hit Kai, it wasn't on the ground, it wasn't directly cancelable, it was, we're up here. And Kai gets bounced into the air, and what exactly to do next isn't as clear. Someone could have an advantage, but neither player necessarily at this skill level knows which one. And this is hard to do even at relatively higher levels of skill, as it's very dependent on tiny things. Which frame hit? How high were you in the air when exactly that frame hit? How much meter is available to cancel certain things? And in Jackal's case, which minions were close enough to do something about it? Getting used to watching for these scrambles also keeps your mind focused on game plans whenever you're not focused on scrambles. Since scrambles are by nature stressful, if you have learned to remove the stress of them, it doesn't break your flow in terms of other thought. For complex characters like Jack-O, Jam, sometimes Venom, sometimes Venom. Managing to keep that particular form of calm will make it more possible for you to get things like house placements, ability activation, card charges, in situations that would otherwise feel like neutral. even close-range combat can, in fact, consist of these scrambles. If you're familiar with them, they actually feel sometimes like it's going in relatively slow motion.
アポステリオリな感覚で申し訳ないけど、あなたでは私に勝てないわ。私の理論値上のスペックは人類を上回っているからね。
To cover as many spaces as possible in terms of where your character can attack, it's important to not only learn all of your buttons and where they go, but which direction you need to be going in for them to be effective. It's not something that is really obvious when you're first starting these, but sometimes direction or speed that your character is moving at, and speed is the thing that matters in this game particularly, affects the effectiveness of a move. A simple example is Greed Sever, which actually hits differently if Kai is running forward. But it's not just that it moves further forward. If you're familiar with fighting game concepts such as frames, there is always a spot where if you are moving further forward, the way the hitbox of the move works within the active frame concept has to change.
And when it comes to getting used to those options, part of the content we are currently working on is part of that actually. A lot of the missions that are in the game create situations where they sort of nudge to you to find a solution to this scenario where an opponent is attacking you with an ability that is difficult to read or makes the movement less clear. So part of what I myself underwent while we were testing to make sure it fit all types of characters was not just doing what the mission said, but going a step further beyond that, thinking about my own game plan. And putting that in relation to what the trial was given. And then learning the situations and different options that come out of that game plan of mine. So it's a lot of trial and error, and it takes a lot of getting used to the different options. So there's the exploratory part, but there's also the muscle memory part. When you start getting used to the options in the scramble that you have, you start being able to do them more quickly and recognizing situations where some options might work better than others depending on what the opponent's response is.
After a while, it stops seeming so random, and you can more easily completely calculate what is happening.
Which is kind of what our bots in other games is intended to do, honestly. The more you do them, the more you're able to see, so to speak. But for scramble situations in particular, part of what you end up learning when you're learning all of these different options is your ability to commit to the options. Because if you hesitate you lose a lot of speed that you could have otherwise had, which is part of why fighting certain types of people can be quite stressful. Not because the option you're trying is incorrect, not because the opponent is necessarily making it difficult to do that option, but just because you're slower than the option requires, even though you're doing the calculation. Now, it doesn't completely fix that since it is a CPU, but it does get you to the starting place where a lot of our bots are intended to get you to as well.
A lot of it, therefore, is also getting you to think about different ways to deal with something that may not be as conventional. Whether it is by asking you to play a different character, because in a few cases, our exercises will in fact have you play characters that may not be your main. Or simply by adding extra layers, extra restrictions, forcing you to be creative with each thing. This is partially why we are so dedicated to finding out whether or not particular character styles are unable to take certain actions. Guilty Gear's high variability in terms of what characters can do makes it impossible to say with any certainty that every character can do this style or this thing in the same way. But this is definitely a game where your main options are to find someone who understands the magic and how to fight it. Or potentially lose a lot while doing crazy things. And even if you do understand the matchup, there's always a chance that that one person that has a completely crazy idea as to how to do it, and has also trained this completely crazy idea because they decided this is worth training. It's difficult, but it doesn't mean I can't do it.
I feel like this is something also applies in a lot of fighting games. Like, for example, in Street Fighter V. Hold on a sec. In Street Fighter V, Liga, for example, has an option that a lot of people who train at lower levels difficulty to use for which is and it is a difficult thing to pull off, but part of it is just this exact concept being able to recognize the moment scramble where now have something happening.
Even with a game with additional vectors like this one, for the most part, most characters in this game are either moving towards, away, or nowhere. The higher mobility characters usually only have one additional option in that set, or if they are retreating, their option for closing back in quickly is reactive. And often their retreat isn't something you want to chase all that hard anyway, as those characters tend to be like Jam and Chip, who you don't really care if they're that far away from you. They don't generally get a lot of advantages out of gaining distance from you, relative to being dangerous. This is actually a common thing among our bots, because sometimes you just need a hard thing to do to make you have to focus really hard on everything else. A distraction. And in fact, it is through our Street Fighter bots at least, where this concept can be easily seen, at least for certain characters. If you didn't really believe in the fact that just thinking about two things is stressful mentally, just try to do specific things while making sure to do others. The difficulty of bots in many cases changes directly by how many things in the bot you're actually trying to do. Which is why we generally don't recommend that you spend too much time getting points on the easy section of the bot until you've built up muscle memory for doing those easy things. Once you've built up the muscle memory for them, and feel as if you are able to do them consistently and confidently, you're either going to be able to do it and therefore not have any problems in the situations you're discovering, or you will suddenly realize and learn that it's not that easy to keep even that up while focusing on a different aspect of match. One of our bigger tests for ourselves, in fact, is to use our Ed and Lara bots with this intention, because it's fairly easy to get points either technically on the extreme level, where all you have to do is anti-air, or on the level where you just have all of these options for getting points and you can quickly get up to 10. However, if you put real effort into doing what you normally do to get points at the lower levels, make sure you never drop anything, don't spend too much time defending, try to play little footsies, keep them away from you to make the situation better, and then require yourself to only actually score anti-airs, your life can become very difficult. game is a lot about that as well, but more specifically, there are too many more things here. Fortunately, you often don't have to anti-air with the same regularity against an opponent who is actually trying to be successful. It's not that anti-airing isn't important, but rather that you're moving yourself so much and moves that you're using have so many good options for dealing with situations like that, so you don't actually find yourself unable to defend. Your mind is already on any number of things that could function as anti-airs if they really happen. This is often why you'll see in our training that we will go for things that aren't necessarily immediately good ideas to see how the moves interact. Because every new interaction you can learn to bother your opponent in some way is what the old heads would call mad tech. Similarly, using the same option, but with the only reason to use it, even if it failed the previous time, being that, oh look, this range is a little different, I wonder what happens this time, can be helpful because you know your opponent already recognizes how to defeat this tactic, and they're likely to do it. If you keep on doing the same thing, they're very likely to have a response ready. The question you're trying to answer, especially if you're training, is, does that response work at every range? Does it work every time? Does it work with all the same levels of advantage? And if you find one where it does not, or, as is often the case for beginners, find that the one time you happen to lose was a fluke, and most of the time you win, you're able to become more confident in your move for when you have to play seriously. A player without much craziness that only ever plays completely safe is often not as effective at the mid-levels. Which brings us to a Guilty Gear specific, well, not entirely. Eunice will let you do this at least a little bit too, but not in the same way. can use Roman cancels in much the same way. Your move was unsafe, it was a terrible idea to do naturally. But you can use it with the Roman cancel system to completely confuse your opponent, both in the sense that your frame data ends up being different, and that the scramble you create is more or less under your control. Jam's Roman Cancel Ryujin is actually one of the strongest of these options in the game. Since a Roman Cancel stops you from doing whatever move you were doing, but retains whatever momentum you had in any direction. And because Ryujin is, I am going to fly across the screen as fast as possible and I'm not caring what you have to say about it, it's borderline teleportation. The Roman Cancel itself makes it reactable if you didn't do it late enough that your opponent couldn't have hit a button. However, because they would then have to remember which Ryujin you did, and the fact that their focus would be taken up by the Roman Cancel, possibly, and that Jam has like 3 different ways to do Ryujin even without any card charge, and 2 different ways to cancel it, and 9 different ways to attack once she's done so, something is going to get through. Often, she doesn't want to hit anything. She just wants to make you flinch so that she can get close enough to do something else. But the key here is, like you were saying before, this is creating a scramble where Jam is technically somewhat in control of what is going on. Jackal has less of these, but she can do it with her crouching dust and her standing dust. Different things mean that in this matchup, for example, Jackal is not likely to have as much usage to do such things with, and therefore has to be a little bit more conservative about it. Knowing how stressed your opponent is also helps heavily in these situations. You can even Roman Cancel it after, as you've just seen, though at that point you are going to be money grabbing and triple. Purple Roman Cancels being those which you get after your move has started to recover and is not in its startup frames. This is not entirely true. There's like 1 or 2 projectiles where you get like yellow or red, even though you seem to be recovering already, but that might actually just be my lack of knowledge.
アポステリオリな感覚で申し訳ないけど、
A large part
あ
of
な
this
た
is
では
therefore
私に
just
勝てない
the
わ。
willingness to try
私の
something,
理論値上のスペックは
but
人
not
類
with
を上回ってい
necessarily
る
the
から
hope
ね。
of success. You are trying it to learn what happens. And every situation you can recognize where there is some difference, it can be worth it if you're not playing too seriously to try it again.
気負いかかるよう親善試合第一開始。
There's no damage. If that had been the only time I have ever tried to hit Crouch Heavy Flash in response to Jackal Dust, I would come to the conclusion that, oh, Jackal Dust doesn't lose to this move. Yet, the truth is that it loses a large amount of time. To the point where I don't think of that move as something to block, but rather something to hit Crouch Heavy for.
親善試合第二洗礼を持て。
Against certain characters, even a move that is technically unsafe, or at least can be checked, can lead to scrambles. Because if you know what your opponent's check will be, and you have any options that work at a slightly strange range, you can entirely aim to hit with that move at a timing where that will change the situation in your favor. Not completely, not this is now a mix-up, or this is now an attack string, but simply you're testing your opponent's ability to recognize the same situation you have, except that the attacking player almost always has advantage in that situation. They're the ones with the plan, and the other person has a very short period of time to recognize what's going on as compared to them. Also, while you can use Roman cancels to extend combos,
親善試合第2切磋せよ
there are often at least a couple downsides to this, specifically related to how your meter recharges that battery. Once you've exhausted your options against something, and you're fairly confident that it is known, there is no chance that this is going to work most of the time. Then you can hand it off, give it up, and maybe when you're playing with someone else who understands it, they can tell you that, hey, this has happened to me against your character. Or another high-level player of your character can tell you outright, no, you can do that. You have to be really good at this particular thing. But when you are first starting out with these games, it's a lot more likely you're going to come to conclusions about things that are not correct. Both because of your lack of speed in certain situations, and lack of recognition of what the situation is. Has become faster and faster. More situations become recognizable. More potential opponent mindsets become recognizable. While high mobility characters tend to benefit from this more than lower, Even characters like Potemkin can get away with this sort of thing sometimes because of the strength of their options. High mobility characters are not normally granted a lot of capacity to hit huge spaces or to have very high priority in situations. Whereas, heavy characters tend to have some big hitboxes.
気負い立たぬよう親善試合第一開始
じゃあ学ぶのここで友人だなじゃあ学ぶのダンスじゃあ学ぶのじゃあまだないとねじゃあ学ぶの一歩ずつ
Learning to efficiently strike with the edges of any hitbox can change whether or not your scramble goes in your favor. And it's a standard component of footsies. But unlike footsies where you are shimmying for position, and your aim is to get your opponent to whiff or similar, in this situation your goal is to recognize that the situation has happened, which might be entirely, if not out of your control, at least not necessarily something you set up or expected.
親善試合第二勝者は一人
じゃあ学ぶのじゃあ学ぶの
But as we've said on the other streams, this is something you generally pick up as one of the final things before you start to get intermediate and take the game seriously. You can of course become intermediate without doing any of this, but you end up being the sort of intermediate that often has trouble with high-level players. And not just trouble, because again, intermediate will generally have trouble with high-level players by default. That's how that works. You're more likely to not understand what is happening, which is a terrible situation to be in most fighting games. It can kill your motivation, make you feel bad about the way you play or about yourself, or just leave you feeling helpless within one match. And even then, depending on the scenario you were in, that can be a big deal. Middle-of-the-road characters like Kai don't tend to have either of these advantages as heavily. But because they're so solid, they end up being the character that you have to deal with, that you need this sort of thing for. Which is often what gets characters like this the reputation of being top tier in games where there's relatively heavy balance. Since they lack any really blatant or obvious weaknesses, a good player often makes it look like you never had a chance to deal with anything because you're too mentally aware that they had an option, they just couldn't or didn't use it. And couldn't doesn't always feel correct. If you were not the one that caused that situation to become couldn't. If your opponent said, I couldn't anti-air because of something you did, something about minions, something about meter, something about spacing, unless you have faith that you can recreate that situation, it might not matter to you at all. So for example here, we can see that Just Fine manages to hold a very specific game plan. Using those small moments, those scrambles, to cause Unrabbit to play more defensively. And once he's entered that mind state, particularly if he doesn't notice, it can allow minion armies to build up. The final main aspect of this, however, is the importance and impact of consistency in these situations. If you have something you cannot do consistently, it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't do it. Especially in matches with new people or relatively high level people. Because if you happen to succeed, you have the potential to show people a skill that you don't necessarily have enough to make a difference in the match if they choose to not respect that possibility. But depending on where you are in the game, your higher level opponents will respect your option even if you've only managed to show it once. Not everyone does this, but a few don't want to risk going for something safe and then losing to what seems like an impossible reaction. If they have experience with other players who use the same shenanigans, they might be more willing to go, you can't do that every time, and keep going. But that takes a lot of confidence in certain situations. An unknown player doing something that you didn't necessarily think was possible, or don't believe is consistent, but they can do it often, is a terrifying prospect. And this is a skill that has bigger payoffs as you become more skilled, not less. Because if you have other blatantly obvious skills, in addition to some intimidating thing you can do, the opponent can end up feeling quite helpless.
なんだ、飴持ってないの？アポステリオリな感覚で申し訳。
ジャムさん、はい。シンさんは寝れていますか？
So once again, let's look at Kai, a character who, as I noted, you generally need this sort of thing in order to fight against. Kai's defenses are not the easiest to crack, and recognizing when Kai can actually hit you, and when he has to at least think about it, can be difficult. So try not to get too discouraged at the requirement to break that sort of defense, as it's much quicker for you to gather the information on spacings where you can mislead the opponent than it is for them to recognize it's happening. Opponents with better defense don't generally necessarily mean you actually want to play safer, for example. You may be less successful until you've learned something that is actually terrifying, or until your execution is enough to cause them to be stressed. But this learning process is the way that you actually get there in the first place. Despite the fact that a fourth member of the team has in fact joined us, we're not too likely to go too much longer. There's only so much one can repeat a concept. Even if there are other tiny specifics of it to be talked about. However, the appearance of Axel does give us a little bit more in terms of how to look at this. As he is one of those characters where if you try this too much, he'll just take advantage of the fact that you try to take any action at all. Axel can be very effective by just continuing to poke at where you approximately are on the screen, or the easiest vector for you to get towards it. It's therefore important both to understand how to reposition yourself and how to delay doing so long enough to get Axel to have a problem. You can see here, for example, that Jackal in particular has to be very careful with this, as she doesn't have as much strength without her minions, and maximizing them. This is super important, knowing where to put the opponent so that the minions are able to cause trouble is therefore a skill you have to work on for quite a long time.
戦においてはまず相手の背後を見ることです。態度があれば知恵、なければ決死の覚悟を持っています。そしてもし守るものが見えたらその敵に勝つことは諦めるべきなのです。ジャムさん、進化は出れていますか
？But every time we talk about Axel, we talk about the fact that his moves are not in themselves fast, meaning that at least some things he has trouble reacting to quickly. He does have some moves that are quick, but they have relatively limited specific positions that they target. He therefore also sometimes has a similar situation to Vega. His faster moves sometimes miss, leading to him feeling, oh, I should hit something longer. If you can read the rhythm of this, sometimes you can use that moment to do something like that.
ジャムさん勝利大勝。
矛盾ってセールスが下手な長の話してるか？勝負の前にあまりおしゃべりしちゃダメね。
For a character like Kai, who is not so good at creating randomness and scrambles against Axel, this doesn't come up as much. His situation is a lot more about understanding when Axel is going to move to a particular spot and spots that he can easily attack. Kai can easily stay out of these spots while still creating some situations that Axel has to deal with. And while their ranges are not technically comparable, Kai's control actually exceeds Axel's in many situations, simply because Axel's control is based on keeping people from getting near him, and Kai can move to the edge of his range and stress him out from there. It's therefore a combination of patience and bravery. Bravery doesn't necessarily mean going in, but it does mean trying things in situations to lead to an advantage that might not otherwise work. For most games, the basis of offense is to do this, at least at the higher level. There's of course offensive pressure, but if you want to do more than that, you have to put more of a push on the opponent. And in this case, that push refers to moving to a position they're uncomfortable with, and then taking just about any action you think would actually come out to be beneficial to you. The key here being to expand your perception of what that means by adding in moves that lead to either scrambles or overall shifts in scenario. Here's one good example from our Axel side. There are simply timings and spacings where just using Axel's forward heavy slash will get through things you wouldn't otherwise expect them to. But you're not going to learn those if you go, I'm not hitting this move because it's too easy to stop, or I'm not hitting it in this situation, it looks this way. Here's a good example. If one trades with Kai in the air using that move, who's at advantage when you get up? You may not be able to know that directly.
戦闘スタイルの異なる
In this case, let's look at that as we get closer to the end of the stream. From the perspective of Kai again. A lot of Kai's moves target approximately the middle or low, or are hard to evade because of the size of the spell. Therefore, there is automatically a space on the screen where forward heavy slash from Axel will beat an offensively minded Kai, I'd say 80% of the time. You can't use it when Kai is on defense because he'll just stop you and usually get quite a lot of combos. But you don't necessarily care if Kai is on defense with Axel. In fact, this is one of your most comforting moments when Kai has decided, okay, I need to take a break so that you don't do crazy things. But if that situation is helpful to you, if it's calming to you, then you don't really have a reason to not occasionally hit the forward heavy slash, especially if you have enough health to get away with it. Your goal would therefore be to make Kai defensive so that you aren't stressed out. This gives you enough time to at least start to think about, well, what do I want to do when Kai's on defense? But Axel is not really lacking in options for what to do there. It's just that most of them will be quite heavily defended or evaded, meaning that you don't really get to do that much in terms of actually getting damage. However, you're often not at much risk. You get to poke for quite a long time, and while Axel is not exactly a character who gets a lot out of the Roman cancel I mentioned earlier, he definitely can do some crazy things. In fact, it's sort of a loop. You get to the point of doing one thing that isn't quite crazy, but definitely has a time and place for it. To get your opponent into the mental state where crazy things, when you have meter, are actually at least reaction tests, if not mix-ups. Now we have Axel with at least some meter, and Kai is not the strongest at using his in the long range match, as he doesn't really benefit that much from it. Axel has ways to deal with his projectile, even if they're not so great, and he can just keep spacing. There you see one of his other good options. If you've got the Kai to be defensive enough, you may even get away with using that move without having to worry about things. At this point, the matches are usually lost purely because of the difference in meter. But another thing that this lets you do is move to the position you like for whatever reason.
戦闘スタイルの異なる相手から学ぶことは実に多い。私のアクセル、マーカー、カイ、シュート。
The key then becomes to recognize when the opponent has moved into a particular mindset due to your quote-unquote business. And now the ultimate demonstration of a match where this actually has to happen. Omnimax in the zombie color today. You can see as the match starts off, both players are mostly playing safely, mostly doing things that make sense, and as a result, nearly nothing is happening. There's no way to tell who is more advantaged here, except by meter, and even that won't necessarily make a huge difference in the Kai matchup. It's not a deciding factor in a lot of situations. But that was a better demonstration of what we're talking about. To dash up with no specific intention, to see what the opponent does, and manage to react to that action in some way. Now, the reaction itself is not necessarily, oh, well, you jumped back, so Grinder will definitely work. But there's a chance of it, and that chance is a big deal. On the other side, we see similar things. Air recover into forward slashing in the air, back stance style stuff. And quite a bit more actual flow into offense. This probably fits a lot more based on people who play other games closer to what you consider to be footsteps. But never forget that all of their complex options are at least available even if not immediately being used. Double jumps, air dashes, splits, Roman cancel conversions. And the understanding that once you have committed to something, you can just let that be it. You don't have to specifically find a way to make it work. It either will or won't work, and you can focus on the next thing happening. If you are on the receiving end and you happen to get away from a move that looked like it would hit you, your escape option may therefore not lead to the same thing you expect. An opponent who has mastered doing this will be looking to see where you went and probably reacting to it. It isn't necessarily that they thought, well, why didn't that attack hit? Being surprised by missing with an attack is a common thing, but the sort of player that thinks in terms of scrambles often doesn't have this problem. They're not thinking about whether or not the move they're doing is definitely going to work or not. In fact, they might even have the skill to convert off it even without expecting it to hit. In Guilty Gear, this is another relatively important skill. To try a move you expect to be blocked, or expect to miss, or worse, realize it has hit, quickly recognize how it has hit, and go into a combo. You can see it here at least somewhat. Immediate adaptation to attacks that technically could have hit but didn't. Something you might be expecting to hit. Positions you end up in that aren't quite as expected overall. And yet immediately converting into whatever the next thing is. With Kai's relatively lower mobility and directional attacks, he's not always going to be doing very specific tricky things in the same spaces as others. But the mental spaces involved lead to different types of play. Our hope is that upcoming exercises in this year, for those who own this game along with many others, will help that specific skill to improve. While we've definitely seen that awareness can be improved somewhat heavily by using the BBFC bots, which you can find on the website as usual at BBFC-bots. Technically it's only one bot, so if you have that game, you can give it a try. One set of inputs, that is. Understanding combo theory and technically certain situations where you have to throw combo theory out the window and go with whatever your gut says. Is the other important thing to take from this. Once you develop the eye for this, you're able to apply it to both sides of the equation, realizing that you've just got out of a situation where you are not in the optimal position and shouldn't attack. And realizing when you could use an unconventional method to make sure that your opponent does not escape entirely, when they are the ones that have managed to get out of your pressure or your pants. It can also apply backwards in situations where the thing to do, despite all of your instinct, is to remain calm and do pretty much nothing.
戦闘スタイルの異なる相手から学ぶことは実に多い。私の所作もあなたの糧になれば幸いです。
Some of the strongest emergent tech in games for many years have come from players whose choice in a situation was to neither attack nor defend as quickly as they could, but to try something that might not work. and in so doing, learn a new thing that becomes standard as quickly as it can spread across the internet. Color switch. So for reference, Omni-Rabbit is now back in his standard color, and yet reality is indeed that's color zombie type. This is a good beat of music. Kai's counter to Axel's forward heavy slash is actually simple. He jumps up. Now this is not a great idea because then Axel could do other things. But in the sense of making it possible to get a good start, it's definitely something to consider, simply because it forces Axel to think about more things. It gives the impression that Kai wants to be offensive, at least a little bit, while making Axel have to consider a different method of checking Kai's current position. And by checking, I mean stopping. Combining this with both ground and aerial projectiles means that Axel simply doesn't have the capacity to make the same style of movement and attack. As you can see here, the forward jump helps as well, though it's a little bit easier to anti-air if you do it too much. And Axel doesn't necessarily have to commit as hard in order to anti-air it. The other counter you're already seeing. Just standing punch. You can check that attack in a lot of situations, but this does leave you open to a lot of other things that Axel can do and use to shift your mental state. In other words, it still counts as being defensive, and he doesn't do a ton of damage either. Omni Rabbit remains in the white. This is one of the matchups he got a bit of experience with at Combo Breaker, but because of the fact that Kai players do somewhat need to do this, it can actually end up being very difficult to tell what a Kai's true game plan or style is. You can only learn new technological stuff about the matchup, and it's not a super complex matchup in that regard. However, you can definitely learn a lot about the ranges at which certain things happen, and that is very helpful in your matches as a whole. You're so used to fighting other people that you may have missed out on the little interactions that happen in the spaces between two characters aiming to do the same thing. Those tiny differences that make the match change because one person can or cannot counterattack But you've never had to think of it before in that way because everyone else you fought either had a different specific way of counterattacking or nothing. Micro ranges, basically. And as you can see, even that situation comes up fairly often. Eventually the players have the same concept of what to happen at the same moment of the quick draw. Why? Because they're exactly the same range and that's the best thing they could think of to do with their character at the time. We see a simple adaptation from the other side as well. Getting jabbed out was not enough reason to go, well, I'm definitely not going to just walk up and throw you. And why should it be? Your opponent hasn't proven in any way that you shouldn't think you can just walk up and throw them. Similarly, consistent success with jumping may not be about, oh well, this is hard to anti-air because I can't anti-air other Kai. It could be that you've never faced the Kai that ends up at the spacing that the anti-air becomes difficult because no one's ever tried before. Yet you see it happen here consistently. Being placed in that position seems to make it meaningfully harder to anti-air. Kai just ends up at a space where anti-airing with other Kai can be difficult. But to have the presence of mind to recognize, I can't anti-air not because this isn't working directly, but because this is unfamiliar territory and possibly manipulated territory. It's where you pull your game to the next level, and I say pull instead of push because it's much like taking your old self and forcefully pulling them up to the point where they understand that the situation is different. As usual though, we'll be ending our stream with either a duel or this matchup. Once again, we have a lot more research to do before our gear exercises, but whatever we end up calling them are ready, but we've definitely seen some things. And what we have seen is showing promise. Therefore, you can expect to see those presumably on the Friday of the following week, not this upcoming week. If you do have a stream this Friday, it will most likely be Dead or Alive 6. There'll be no stream tomorrow, as we don't have anything specific for Bandai Casuals, and we are still working on those good gear exercises. Therefore, I'm likely to do any videos or Street Fighter content at the usual stream time. For various reasons, we may have skipped Kame House this week. Stay tuned on our Twitter to _MK_FTC for more information on that. But most likely you're going to get it at the last minute. But next week we should be back with another Mishmash and Battle on Street Fighter 5. But not promising another Tuesday train, as by then we may actually have something to do on the Bandai Casuals for Wednesday, and we'll be skipping the Tuesday stream, possibly. That said, we've come to the end of our Tuesday train for tonight. This has been Rillian, 142MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.